Light heavyweight always needs new contenders, and coming at you in the mix from Vegas this weekend, we have a returning and resurgent the Baltic Gladiator. It's Modestas Bukauskas taking on Ultimate Fighter finalist Zac Pauga. And when you do look at this fight overall, I mean, it's really strange matchmaking to start off a card this way when Zac Pauga's last time out won in a co-main event slot.
Exactly.
And Modestas Bukauskas was the curtain jerker to a pay-per-view card, beating the hometown guy in Tyson Pedro as a massive underdog. And that's kind of been the redemption arc for Modestas Bukauskas. He comes into the UFC, he's all fire and fury, Cage Warriors light heavyweight champ, finishing everybody left, right, and center, a karate black belt, a Gintis combat system black belt. His dad is Gintis Bukauskas. He has a black belt under his dad's combat system. Matt, that's kind of like slam. Yeah, Omar Morales getting a black belt in his dad's system. That's kind of strange.
I'm thinking more like Del Curry, Steph Curry type stuff.
Well, maybe. But for Bukauskas, a really interesting striker. He has that crazy debut against Andreas Michailidis where he finishes him in the 5th minute of the 5 minutes in the first round. And then somebody pulls the pin on the door and Andreas kind of flops around like a fish, like a bass. But when you look at it for Bukauskas, he went on a bit of a losing streak and it was a little chintzy at times. Now, we know that Bukauskas, it was really a lot of flashy striking, and then in his fight against Khalil Roundtree Jr., the oblique kick seemed
that was
like
disgusting.
It could be a career ender. So the flash and flare from Bukauskas, it was snuffed out. We remember him for his fight against Michael Oleksiejczuk, where the backward pressure but the good volume wasn't able to win it out. And long before Kai Kara France versus Amir Albazi is one of the worst decisions ever, was Bukauskas versus Oleksiejczuk.
That's not one of the worst decisions ever. They had close volume. One guy moved forward, one guy moved backwards. I knew you were going to bring this up.
1:30-27 MMA decision, 16-29-28 Bukauskas
You thought
won.
that Trevin Jones beat Javid Basharat. No one else did.
No, I didn't. But regardless, when you look at this matchup, for Bukauskas, he goes back to Cage Warriors after about a year away. He beats the former middleweight champ Lee Chadwick. He goes into a title fight and gets it done against 39-year-old Chuck Campbell. And it's crazy to see Bukauskas from the fight they had against Campbell, 4th round finish in that one. He's still doing the same things that he did really well on his way up through. The movement's still there. The knee doesn't seem to be compromised. And when he was fighting against Tyson Pedro in the 2nd round, he was able to land that same right hand kind of rushing across that he landed against Campbell to get the knockout win. So Bukauskas riding a wave of success. He had a giant win his last time out against a fringe guy in Tyson Pedro. And now all of a sudden, against a guy like Zac Pauga, who in his own right, I mean, tasted defeat for the first time in his pro career against one motor Muhammad Usman on the Ultimate Fighter Season 30 in the finale. He wins the first round handily, and then Motor, I don't know, flip the switch, put the key in the ignition.
And that's the good thing for Pauga. He did not look good in that UFC debut up at heavyweight, but I feel like he did make a much better version of himself being known in his light heavyweight debut. I know Jordan Wright's not the guy at light heavyweight, but I do think that is an important win. I do think it's an important matchup when you're looking at how does he match up against tall, lanky strikers who can move backwards, will fight in an upright stance. The difference is, of course, Jordan Wright is much more hittable, and normally when he gets hit, the fight's kind of over, whereas Bukauskas is a very comfortable fighter on the back foot, but that really is kind of the issue, right? That's the thing. No matter what you thought the score was of that Oleksiejczuk fight, my whole point is he's a guy who is comfortable moving backwards. And if the volume is 1-for-1, who are the judges probably going to go with? They're going to go with the fighter who's moving forwards and landing their own volume. And the thing that Pauga does have going for him is when he's landing his boxing combinations, when he is able to get on the inside, he is able to land for a decent level of volume. He's not just looking for that one big knockout strike, but I do think that's going to be very important for him. If he does just kind of wade in there, throwing those big bombs, looking for the knockout, well, that's when Bukauskas can lead him into some of his bigger straight shots, because I could see a world where Bukauskas uses his movement almost like a weapon without the volume behind it, right? If he does lead Pauga into a big straight shot, it will be a very damaging one, and that's going to be the really important thing in this fight. How does Bukauskas use his movement? Because if he is willing to move around the cage quite a bit, that's going to be a big benefit. If he gets caught up against the cage, though, that's when we could see Pauga having a lot of success.
Well, when we saw Zac Pauga before he made the jump to the Ultimate Fighter, he's 5-0 as an amateur, started his amateur career at 30. He's only 35 right now, so the age might be there, but he is still young in his career. We know him as a former college football player. Was Zac Pauga like Brendan Schaub? Brendan Schaub, noted football player in college, but
Matt Mitrione, perhaps.
When you look at Zac and you consider all of his skills on a page, he really does push that forward pressure. You saw in his fight against Marcus Perez kind of rallying back out of some sticky situations. Perez missed weight in that one, and if you do consider it, Pauga landing the nice body shot. He likes to land that jab to the body and then come up with the right hand. I know Dan Tom with MMA Junkies all over that one, so shouts to Dan right there. But overall, I mean, for both guys, they both have good cardio. Pauga's got the volume. Bukauskas kind of throws with power when he does decide to throw, but Bukauskas sometimes he's waiting, he switches his stances, he moves quite awkwardly for a big guy. He doesn't necessarily move like a small guy as a bigger guy, but he does move quite well in this light heavyweight division. So overall, when you do look at it, it can be a little bit of low volume for Bukauskas. And if you do consider when he does go with the blonde Brunson look or the Charles Oliveira look, it doesn't really work out for Modestas, but when he goes with his natural blonde look, he does tend to win out on fights. If you look at his Instagram now, it seems to be the darker hair. So we'll see if that prevails. But Matt, when you look at a matchup like this, Pauga against Jordan Wright was almost a 3-1 favorite. He is the underdog in the matchup. Bukauskas was the underdog in his last fight against Pedro, and now he's favored to get the win. We have a look at the Tapology votes to see what their fans are thinking on this one. I'm going to say over-under on Tapology, 65% Bukauskas.
I'll say over.
Couple of wins in that UFC record. It's way over. 632 total votes, 85% Bukauskas, 61% by decision, 32% by knockout for the 15% that have Pauga, 65% by decision, 32% by knockout. So Matt, it's two guys really trying to make their way up in a division that all of a sudden has Jamal Hill as the champ and Alex Pereira jumping up to challenge Jan Blachowicz. So some big time fights, but these guys both coming off of wins their last times out. Who is the pick here?
I have a really hard time with this fight because I do think Bukauskas can lead Pauga into a really big power shot on the back foot, but my issue is, if Pauga is slightly outlanding him on the lead foot, is Bukauskas going to go to the grappling? Because I do think that's something that we could see. I do think he's the more likely of the two to try to mix in the wrestling, because if Pauga is, again, just waiting in, not really being cognizant of the takedown attempt, Bukauskas could go underneath and try to land one of those takedown attempts, but I'm going to go with the slight underdog in this one. I think Pauga's going to get on the inside, make it uncomfortable for Bukauskas. He can land that big shot if he is able to time it, but if he is caught kind of on that in-between, I think Pauga's going to be able to land some combinations. So I'll go with the slight underdog in the opener.
I mean, if you do consider it for Bukauskas' last time out, it wasn't much of a fight against Pedro. Pedro slowed round 2. Pedro slowed heavily round 3. He just looked completely compromised. The cardio wasn't there. Bukauskas was able to land on the outside, and as I said, it was 2:45 in the second round where he lands that big right hand. But that was pretty much it. And for Pauga, if you go back and rewatch that fight that he had against Jordan Wright, it was equally as bad. It was awful.
It wasn't good.
Pauga presses the action, gets pins
Usman
right up against the cage, and that's pretty much all 3 rounds. So a big win for both guys their last time out. I do like the forward pressure of a guy like Pauga. He did get caught by that big winging left hook that Muhammad Usman was able to throw out there, but going back and watching the tape from Pauga on the way up and through, and looking at Bukauskas, we knew against Nasiglia when Bukauskas was able to kind of hang on to that belt over with Cage Warriors, the takedown defense wasn't there, but he got back up and he ended up getting the finish. He's got a lot of resolve. I mean, the knee was the only thing that evaded him really so terribly in the other loss. But if you look at it for Bukauskas, his other loss that he had that we haven't even mentioned against Jimmy Crute was tearing that front leg off with the leg kicks and landed that nice hook in tight that dropped Bukauskas. So I will go with Pauga as well. Really eager to see who the fans have throughout the week on this one, because it seems like the public is really with the Lithuanian. Modestas Bukauskas. Some big time matchups on this card. 14 total. You are not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.